What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Surf and Sales podcast. I'm your host, Scott Leese, here with my good friend and co-host, Richard Harris. And we are brought to you today by some of our wonderful friends and sponsors, including Lead411.com, Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Vidyard, and Wingman. And everybody, Wingman is offering a free 14-day trial when you mention Surf and Sales. So dig in there, listen to every sales call, and help your sales team navigate some tricky situations on the sales call. So appreciate all of our sponsors. But we are here today talking to my friend Prateek Mathur out of the Chicago, Illinois-ish area, somewhere in Illinois, right, Prateek?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for having me here. Yeah, so I'm based out of Evanston. We're sort of up north of downtown Chicago. And very, very close to Northwestern.
Okay. Now I'm orienting now around the Big Ten kind of speak, Richard. Just in case
Scott only needs to know which baseball field are you near? Are you near Wrigley?
Yeah.
Near Comiskey? Or are you near Soldier Field? United Center? All Scott needs to know.
He's closer to Wrigley.
There you go.
Right? Yeah. So, Prateek, you're the founder of Manager Enablement, and you've been an enterprise sales manager before, and you're a part of a bunch of different sales communities. Give everybody a little bit of some context of who you are and what you're doing and what you're up to right now.
Sure. So I've always been in sales as far as I can remember. It's been 17, 18 years now that I've been within sales, either working for startups or helping establish organizations, as in set up newer sales teams. And, since the last 2 years, I've been, sort of helping newer sales managers, on the side. And I quickly realized that that's really not that scalable. I'm not that scalable, and hence, that I've developed a platform, the last couple of months, which is Ad Manager Enablement, which is really helping early sales managers, navigate their management experience and help them to, of course, become better sales managers. And this is being done through the help of established sales leaders, so folks who are currently VPs of sales and sales directors at some of the world's most iconic organizations. And through their content, through their mentoring, as well as through skill development, I'm hoping to help sales managers lead smarter, hopefully sell more through their teams, and of course, grow their careers.
Yeah. See, the thing that is most interesting to me, and because we've had some dialogue and you've heard me talk about this, but the gap in teaching and training and coaching for folks who want to make the leap to sales management and sales leadership, and even once you are a sales manager or a sales director, hell, even a VP of sales. The coaching and the amount of resources out there disappears quite a bit by comparison to being an individual contributor. So was this something where you saw a need, fill a need, or was this more just something you're super passionate about? I want to know. I want to know what led you to get started, and then maybe you can give everybody just a couple of real tactical tips on either making that leap, or once you're in that role, a few things that are kind of, don't forget to do this, make sure you do this.
Sure, absolutely. So yes, I have been super passionate about helping younger sales managers, and I think this this sort of goes back to my experience. I was one of those sellers who was doing really well selling myself, and one day my manager came to me and he said, "Hey, you can sell. Can you help other sellers get better?" And without any training, any support, I was now suddenly given the sales manager title, and I quickly realized that selling myself and managing people or leading people are two completely different skill sets. And without the right coaching, there's really no way for these newer sales managers to succeed. And as I was going through my process, a couple of months ago, I was really trying to sort of do like a soul searching process, for lack of a better word, wherein which I was trying to understand and trying to really, dissect every decision that I'd made over the last so many years. And that really led me to where I'm at today, wherein which that I've been able to, of course, create this platform. Now, as an answer to the second part of your question, I mean, when it comes to, really, moving from being like an individual contributor to, of course, as in managing people, there are a couple of things. I mean, the one thing that I'll say is, it all starts with the right mindset. Are you at that stage where everyone else around you is greater than you? And if you're at that stage where for a fact that this is the right time to, of course, help and coach and ensure that other sellers are growing their careers, that is, that's that would be as in the first step.
Yeah,
Sorry,
what's the trigger point, right? Like, when do you, and I like the first piece, which is, are people around you smarter than you? But what's the trigger point that I should look for? I'm a top sales rep, thinking about management. What should I be looking at internally about myself to decide if I want to make that move, or even just explore? Because maybe sometimes we don't know and we just need to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, again, going back to the mental mindset, are you ready to, to sort of put yourself, on the back foot, and are you ready to ensure that you're helping other, sellers grow? And I think, that trigger point is when you have grown within your career, when you've been able to, reach every success metric and every success level that you've defined for yourself. And at that stage, that is, honestly, that's what happened to me. That was the time when it was time for me to move to the next step. And of course, internally, yes, you should have already been hitting your goals, but more than any of those goals, how are you helping those around you get better? And, and then once you're at that stage, the one thing is really asking for what you want. What I've seen is that there are a lot of great sellers who have gotten to that stage where they're able to coach other people, but they aren't necessarily able to ask for what they really want. And if you're
what
not
should
really
they be asking for?
I'm sorry?
What should they be asking for?
They should be asking for, for the next step within their career, which is to help other sellers get better at their job. And
so I go into my boss and I say, hey, Prateek, you know what? I'm loving this role. I've hit these numbers. I think I want to explore the next level.
Yeah. But
I say, hey, can I start interviewing? Can I start asking for these things, like super specific? Hey, can I help out on the interview, or can I help on board, or what kind of things should I be asking my boss, who's supposed, they're supposed to be the person to help me get to the next level?
Yeah. So so when you're at that stage where you are hitting your quota and when you're consistently hitting your goals, are you helping the team members around you also get to their goals? That's one. The second piece to it is, at that stage, that's when you also need to think of how else can you add value to your organization. Is it about, building, for example, a customer advisory board for your organization? And can you lead that effort? Is it, for example, ensuring that you're building on the relationship with your cross-functional peers within, finance, legal, etc.? Is it that you're helping your manager, manage their team? So at that stage is when you really need to be able to say, hey, you know what, I have done all these things. I have not only hit my quota, I've not only helped others hit their quota. This is how I've impacted my organization. And now is the time for me to ask for what's better for me.
This is for me, I have two more questions. I'll turn it back over to Scott. One is, should I be doing some of those things without asking for permission, right? Should I be, crafting the draft of what it would take to make an advisory board, or should I wait and go ask my boss first? Should I create some new dashboard or report and then go show my boss and say, here's the initiative? Or is it the opposite where it's like you kind of sit back and wait?
No. So you start yourself, right? I mean, like, you have to take the initiative. One of like the biggest things about management and leadership is being able to take the initiative yourself and showing to the rest of the team that this is how you really do something. So whether it's about creating the Salesforce dashboard, as you just alluded to, or whether it's about crafting what a customer advisory board could look like by building it alongside your cross-functional peers. So you start yourself, take that initiative, and then you go a few steps forward.
Got it. Which I agree with 100%. Let me flip it. One more question.
Sure.
If I'm feeling X internally, how should I not go seek management? Like if I think these three things, I'm probably, need to know that before I go ask about management.
So how should you ask a manager? Is that the question?
No. So my question is, if I'm thinking about going into management and you ask like, okay, I like to help people, I like to do this. So maybe that's an indicator. What are the indicators internally that I should be thinking of that would say, well, keep in mind, this is what management might mean. And people may not know that. So that's kind of why I'm asking the question. Yeah. Like, what are your own internal red flags to say, no, you do not need to be a manager?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things there would be, for example, looking at your financial self, right? I mean, are you at that stage where you've sort of been able to make the money that you have to? Because the second that you move into management, there is a higher probability that it's going to take you some more time to start making a similar amount of commission as you were earlier. So that would be one of the things that I would highly as I recommend doing, is if you're not comfortable or if you're not at that stage where you feel that you're able to take a financial dip for the next couple of months, don't ask for it today. Wait it out, and then go from there.
Great, Scott. I'm going to turn it over to you because I'm going to I'll even hand this one off and say, Scott, when I worked for you. If we want to call it that, my team was okay. We were never the best team, but Scott knew to bring me into management also because of my previous role. But Scott, what are the things you like to see in a rep? How much does that align with what Prateek is saying? And then I'll let you ask him a question.
In a rep, I'm distracted by thinking of the dynamic between me managing you and now the question, which sounded like, what do I want to see in a rep? But
what do you look for in a rep that wants to move into management, or a manager who wants to move into director? Even like we haven't even talked about that.
Yeah, I mean the rep who wants to move into manager. I just wrote a whole book about it with Ryan Walker called From Rep to Manager. But let it be known, first of all. Don't hide it. Don't be intimidated or ashamed of it. Have an open conversation about what needs to get done in order to make that transition happen. And don't wait for the promotion. Obviously, start doing all of these things. Like Prateek said, find ways to add value, make your boss's job a little bit easier, take things off their plate, think of new initiatives that you can kind of spearhead and take over, like a customer advisory board, maybe like you was talking about. Excuse me. The more interesting one to me, just because it's less talked about maybe, is like, what about the sales manager who's trying to get to director, or the director who's trying to get to VP, right? Now you start to get into really kind of strategic thinking and conversation and analysis of the data to point us in a different direction, right? Indications that, a new particular vertical might be opening up for us, or we can double our prices, or, we launch a new product and you're like, yep, I'll take that one, right? And you go, get this new kind of vertical or new product up and running. And a lot of kind of cutting things off at the pass so they don't make it to your boss, right? Like a lot of intercepting, like, oh, there's this problem, I'm going to go fix and solve that problem before it ever lands on Scott's desk. those are some of the things that come to my mind. What about you, Prateek? Can you talk about the manager to director side or the director to VP side in terms of what you feel like somebody should do and where they should put their focus?
Yeah, I mean, I would again go back to what you just mentioned, as in when it comes to the data, as an aspect of it. I mean, how good are you with data? What type of insights is that data really giving you? And based on those insights, what type of strategy and story can you really develop that you can, go back to your, to your VP or to your director, whoever it is, and say that, hey, this is where the opportunity could potentially lie, and if you guys would be open to it, this is how I would attack that particular opportunity. Whether it's developing a brand new channel, whether it's of course developing as like a brand new go to market. I mean, whatever the case may be. So yes, looking at that data and seeing the type of insights, and then building on the strategy based upon that data.
Yeah. And is it like how long do you think that process takes, if you will? How long does it take for a rep to prove it to their boss that they're ready for a manager? Or how long does it take for a manager to prove that they're ready to manage a bunch of other managers and get to the director chair?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, put like a time frame there. But again, I think, when you're
so what is it tied to if it's not a time frame? I agree with you that it's not necessarily a time frame. So what is a better indicator than time frame?
It's tied to the activities, that you're doing. So for example, from a rep to a manager, your quota, how are you helping your team's quota? How are you helping your manager? Then the next thing I would say, manager to director, look at the numbers, see what type of strategy that you can develop. But beyond that, if there are other managers within the organization, how are you helping them get better? How are you really standing out in terms of the type of direction that you've been able to as in give for the organization. So I wouldn't necessarily put it across to time frame, but more of course focus around the type of activities that you're doing.
And what is how are you measuring those activities? Because some of them are not like quantifiable things necessarily, right? It's not like I want my managers to be like, oh, hey, Scott, here, look, there's 5 times today that I prevented problems from coming up to your desk. And I'm like, oh, cool, let's put that on the leaderboard, right? How are you keeping track of these things?
Yeah, so I would say it would probably go down to the impact that you're having for the organization. So let me give you one example. From my background, there was a time when where I was, of course, I'm leading like individual contributors, and as I was finding success doing that, what I started to realize was that some of the other sales managers that were on the organization were doing some things that were fantastic and doing some things that weren't necessarily great. And that's when I sort of stood up and I started to have those sessions with those sales managers. That was one aspect of it. The second aspect of it was going back to some of the newer products that we were seeing on the market. And that's when I used my market knowledge to go back to my product teams and say, hey guys, this is what our competitors are doing. Here's what my recommendations are based upon what I'm seeing. Then the third aspect of it was, working as in cross-functionally and cross-regionally. And that's really basically saying, hey, I have done XYZ and this has been super successful for me. What are some of the things that you all are seeing that has worked, and how can we implement it organization-wide so that the organization is, of course, moving 10 steps forward. So these are some of the things that I had done that sort of helped me to go from being a manager of ICs to being a manager of managers.
This is all fantastic advice, super detailed. Scott, you're gonna have to write an addendum to your book, I think.
No. You mean Prateek will write the addendum to the book.
That's true. Scott doesn't like to work hard. He gets other people to do it for him and then likes to, co-author. Scott's laughing out loud. I wish he would stop going on mute every time I make him laugh, People might think I'm just a dick who doesn't get it.
Okay, there you go. I took myself off mute so everybody can
There you
hear me
go.
laughing.
So I want to pull way out of this conversation. I want to go all the way back, right? So, and we can literally say last century. So was it your first legitimate job? You worked for Coca-Cola?
Yep.
Right? And you were in sales at Coca-Cola?
Yeah. So when I started, and this was back in India, and at that point in time, and this I'm talking about in the late 90s. So around the 70s, India had this nationalist movement, where they basically ensured that every international organization did not have a presence, and this was around the time that like around in the late 90s is when they opened up the market once again, and that's when Coke was sort of, as reestablishing their presence within India. I was given the opportunity to work with them in their merchandising team. So think of a young guy sitting on one of those Coke trucks, going to every mom and pop store, opening up their refrigerator and ensuring that Coke is front and center, and of course, along with Coke and Sprite, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I really started working with them. And going from merchandising, they put me into key account management, and then from key account management, I moved to channel management, and that's when I really realized that at the end of the day, what I really, really, really love doing is working with my customers and tying outcomes to volume. And that's when I moved into sales, where in which I was, managing a fairly large territory.
What in you said, okay, aside from I like working with customers, right? What else made you go, okay, I think I like this sales thing? Because sales is not marketing, right? And it's not customer success, right? There's a different itch that needs to be scratched.
Yeah.
What was your itch?
Yeah, for me, selling a fast-moving consumer goods such as Coca-Cola, and of course having a competitor such as Pepsi breathe down my neck. One of the things that I absolutely enjoyed working with my customers was for lack of a better word, the aggressiveness, that I could bring in. And
define that. So slow down for a second. What do you mean by aggressiveness?
So, for example, when I'd be working with, say, a mom and pop store, at that point in time, I'd be like, hey guys, this is who I am, this is the product that I'm selling. And then they would throw it back on my face saying, yeah, but like Pepsi just decided to print out all my menus, and they decided to also, for example, give me like a 10% off if I were to buy X number of cases. And I was like, all right, that's all well and good. What's really important for you? Is it really more about the menus that they printed for you, or is it really more about the volume and really more about the discount? And that's more important. And that's the piece that I absolutely enjoyed, breaking down my competitor, number one, of course, but number two, being able to stand up and say, hey, you know what? Pepsi did so much for them, and I'm able to do XYZ more that is basically tying into the volume, which means they're making so much more money working with me. And give it another few more days and my competitor will no longer be there.
So in that world of Coke versus Pepsi, which I want to dive in deep on this one for a second, is
this is going to be great. In Coke versus Pepsi.
Exactly. So if I recall, restaurants are either one or the other. Right? Or was it not that way there at that time where it's like, no, they could still sell both?
Yeah. So back then they could sell both.
Okay.
I was going to say, I remember being a kid, Richard, or, at least in my teens, and people would have like Coke or Pepsi on the same, not vending machine, but like, soda fountain or whatever.
Yep.
Well, I would see that like the store, the convenience store, 7-Eleven or whatever, but I don't remember seeing it on a menu, but maybe I just don't remember because of my age, Scott. I stabbed myself in the back on that one for you, buddy. So talk to me though, like how did they train you to talk about Pepsi? Like, were they like, was it like they have nasty sugar water, whereas we have a refreshing flavor?
No, to be honest with you, this is my first sales job without any training. So this is going into a store and saying, hey, you love Pepsi, good for you. Here's, how much discount do you like really need to, to like get these guys out? How much volume can you commit to me based upon what I'm offering you? And it really wasn't anything about, taste or like anything about preference, because at the end of the day, uh, back in those days, if you went into a restaurant and if your waiter or your server, if they offered you Coke, yeah, that's what you drank.
Right.
So
Did you
that's
get a did you get a spiff if like you kicked Pepsi out?
Not early on. Early on, it was just really about establishing Coke's presence more than anything else. And then yes, after that, after some time, then we started to have spiffs that were really more, driven around beating out competition, really more driven around merchandising, really more driven around, how much of a street can I possibly capture that has Coke branding everywhere.
So this will be my last question on this one, unless Scott's got one, which is, what do you drink now, Coke or Pepsi?
I have been a loyalist ever since. So I am still.
No way.
I promise you, me, my wife, both of us still drink Coke.
Wow.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
I can't believe that they converted him. Entirely different question. Maybe it's a little bit related. I mean, gosh, you're selling, CPG, right? And for Coca-Cola, and you've been in a lot of different interesting industries. You went from CPG to insurance to banking to software to more of services in terms of like zero cater. Mm-hmm. Is there a tie that binds all these sales that maybe we haven't thought of?
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the reasons why I was able to, to like progress through different industries was based upon the organizations, that I was working with. They were either sort of starting up. So whether it's this huge brand of Coke that's reestablishing, but they're still sort of like a startup, to, for example, the life insurance organization also, that I worked with. So one of the things that I found over time that I think that I was good at was establishing process, was establishing teams, was establishing go-to-market. And that's one of the things that was sort of consistent, through all the industries, that I've worked in.
Yeah. And then what about the differences in how you, not just how you sell maybe, but like how you operate and trying to sell Shutterstock versus Coca-Cola versus selling in the banking industry? I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like that many people can just move between so many different industries seamlessly. There's got to be some sort of skill there. No? Am I wrong?
I would like to believe that. Yes. I mean, I would say that one of the biggest things would be the fact that, that if you're able to understand what your customer really needs, and if you're able to understand how to solve that problem, whether you're selling a Coca-Cola, whether you're sitting across a CFO and selling life insurance, or whether you are, for example, selling something which is more marketing driven, it really doesn't matter. Are you able to understand what the problem is? Are you able to articulate what that problem is? And are you able to ensure that you have a solution that sort of solves that problem?
But I wonder if that, I have the sense that like that part is harder than we're giving it credit for here. Like it takes a while to learn the ins and outs of the beverage industry. It takes a while to learn the ins and outs and the lingo of the insurance industry and the banking industry and all these different things, right? I mean, I've moved my whole career, I've moved industries, but it's always been like SaaS products and services. So the leaps to me feel quite small by comparison to the leaps that you've made. And, I think I don't know. I'm curious what Richard thinks, but I feel like Prateek is like, a bit of a rare bird here, that he can kind of seamlessly move through these different industries and make it work.
Making sure I'm off mute, right? I'm 8-1 for the year. So I see it that way. I find it more fascinating because I think the skill set of the lateral move and the horizontal ability to sell is fairly easy. I think it was harder for leaders to recognize, and I still see this, like, you need industry experience. It's kind of like, no, you don't. But I think the interesting thing for me is how you went from a very large Fortune brand, a little, maybe a top 10, into lots of other startups. And what's that experience like? And clearly at this stage, you've got the right logos for the startup world, but was that logo of Coca-Cola what got you the interviews originally for those other things?
I'm not sure. I would say yes at the time that I moved to a life insurance company, definitely. But beyond that, I think it was the fact that wherever that I worked, either they were starting up or they were in need of building a brand new sales team. So again, like you still have that same sort of startup mentality where you are, doing like 10 different things all at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's really good. I want to shift a little bit too. I want to shift. You went from India to the States, right? You transitioned. Tough, easy, simple.
So, I have always wanted to try to do an MBA program here within the States for as long as I can remember. And that's what really hasn't got me to Boston. What was honestly crazy was I graduated during the last financial crisis, and anyone in my situation, and I know like a lot of folks from my same batch who were just like, hey, we're just gonna back up, go back home, because of course we have we have student loans. But I think there were two things at that time. One was the fact that I was determined to ensure that I would never be financially stuck because of a student loan, and I'd work my butt off to pay that off. And and then the second aspect of it was I met my girlfriend then and my wife now, and that was like a huge, of course, motivation for me. But was it necessarily difficult moving up? Was it necessarily difficult selling there versus here? There is a slight difference according to me now. Again, I am comparing selling in India between 99 to, of course, 2000, 2007 to now, and I'm sure things have changed there. But I think, at the time that I started to sell here, it was more value driven, more than price driven. Now I'm sure things have changed. Hopefully things have changed.
Got it. Do you ever, and I'm gonna go even a little deeper, hopefully not too dark, but do you ever feel like you are still discriminated against, or were you ever, based on your not coming from America, right? Or because you went through the MBA program and those things, it's never really been an issue for you? And I'm asking because 2020 and 2021 are such
Fortunately, I have never felt that way for any of the employers that I've worked at, for any of the organizations that I've interviewed with, as well as, of course, the people that I work with today. I have fortunately never felt that. I have had colleagues and friends who have come back to me and said that. But for me, fortunately, it's really just been more focused around what I bring to the table and how I can probably elevate the organization more than the color of my skin.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you found those organizations that get it, or never had to even think about it, which I'm kind of hoping is what really is there. Thank you for answering that question.
Of course.
So we're getting to that place where we sort of have to wrap up, although it's fascinating to me that this thing flew by like
Yeah, I
crazy.
can't believe it's been almost an hour already.
I know. So obviously we need to quickly give a shout out to Lead 411, Vidyard, Salesforce, revenue operations team for supporting us, and of course the Wingman and their 14-day free trial. You said, Scott?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, but obviously, our mostly last question for you is what advice can we give to you if you might need it?
Wow, I anyways learned so much from you guys on LinkedIn and on Patreon. So thank you so much for that. But that being said, I mean, when it comes to, for example, you, Richard, that you've been within the sales training space for a while. How did you get into it? How did you get your first big logo? And what were some of your learnings from there that someone who's sort of starting something, which is of course linked to the sales manager piece, that I can use?
Well, first of all, I got lucky. I was fired, which is always my favorite story. But the true story is that company I was with, Mastery, hugged me out the door. They were being acquired by Intel. Intel did not need another person in my role, and it was just one of those decisions where I'm line 1,422 on a 100-line spreadsheet of priorities. But they did a really nice job of hugging me out the door, which taught me a great lesson, gave me a lot of runway. Was interviewing like crazy and couldn't get over the hump of the next thing. And it's because I lacked vision. People were asking me if I wanted to, if I would run an SDR team, what did I want? I'd give them that stupid answer of I want your job, VP of sales. What I should have said, and this is 2012, what I should have said is, I want to build a world-class dominating SDR organization. Like that's the answer, right? So I missed that. And then a few months later, I got a phone call from a company in Austin that Scott had introduced me to a year previous. And they said, can you help with this? And I said, sure. And I went down to Austin for a month, flying back and forth, sat on a plane next to Nick Mehta. At the time, Gainsight was like 15 employees, had a second client for a month. And then I picked up the phone and called John Barrows. And I said, what do you think I should do? And he's like, go for it, man. It doesn't happen this way. Make it happen. So, and he's always been supportive to me. So my story is different than a lot of other people. One logo begets the next, and it has less to do with the logos, in my opinion, as much as it has to do with the pains you solve, right? So my tagline is, teaching reps to earn the right to ask questions and which questions to ask. And by the way, here are the companies I've done that with. Not here's the companies I've done business with. So that's my first piece of advice is focus on your story and make it as concise as possible in a pain that relates to who your buyers are. That's the best piece of advice and how I did it. Scott's advice is different and works, which is, and I'll pause and make sure I answered your question, which is you build your side hustle while doing your first job until you can make the transition.
Yep.
But I hope did that answer your question, or was there more to it?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Sure. So Scott, you want to give a shout out on this?
Well, you kind of talked about, my philosophy on it, and it was to kind of de-risk the endeavor as much as I could, and so I started dabbling, and by the time I got to a place where the side thing was kind of equal to the main thing, I felt a little more confident with it. Richard knows this, like I'm a bit of a chicken when it comes to this. Like I should have maybe, made the leap before. But I did feel like, I had some unfinished business, right? Like I've had a couple nice little wins, but I always wanted, maybe it's my ego, I don't know, ambition, whatever you want to call it. Like I always wanted to have one big win or one big, pop, if you will. So I could just always, I never wanted somebody to be able to hang something over my head and be like, well, you're not qualified to speak on this because you've never done that, right? Unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to have that thing. So, I kind of did all the things that I felt like I needed to do, and it was a natural time to do something else. And so that's how it felt right for me.
One last question for you, Prateek, is what has Scott taught you about tequila?
Tequila, that's for sure.
Can you name one thing? Like, has he taught you about how it's made, how to recognize smoothness? Has he?
You better get this answer right, because I don't want people thinking that I'm not teaching about tequila, because I have definitely provided content about tequila, Prateek.
Man, I would say it's perhaps some of the brands that I've never really heard of before.
There you go.
Maybe.
There you go. I've got him away from the Patron only, knowledge base, Richard.
Right. Patron's a little bit like Jägermeister at this point, right?
It's more like Budweiser at this point.
That's true too. All right. Hey, Prateek, thank you so much for coming on. I know you joined us last minute, so we really, really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for helping us out, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. Thanks, Richard. Take care.
Yeah.